We're going to build our moon using images, actual photographs of textures. And, to make it even cooler, these are photos that are taken around Middletown High School. In the Week 15 folder, you'll see a folder called Texture Resources. Click to open that, and you'll see a whole list of about 45 different images. Click on the first one, which is called Asphalt 1, and you'll see a preview. And then you can use the previous or next buttons to navigate through. When you see an image that you think is cool and might be helpful, go ahead and try and download it. Right-click, Save Image As, and go ahead and save it. It'll probably go into your Downloads folder. Do this until you've downloaded several options that you might want to explore. The minimum number of images we're going to use is 3, but it'll probably be helpful to download more than that because you'll want to play around with different options. Now it's time to go ahead and build the moon. But before I get rolling, I want to clean things up a little bit. So I'm going to hide my guide by hitting Control semicolon, and I'm also going to hide my planet and shadow layer as well as my nebula folder. That way I have a relatively clean canvas to work on. Now I'm going to select my Sphereize layer so that when I bring in images, it'll build underneath the shadow but on top of the Sphereize layer. Now I'm going to head to where I downloaded my texture selections. I ended up choosing about 10 that I really liked. Now I'm not worried about color because I'm going to be removing the color from the images and putting my own in. So I just need to figure out which one I really want to use as my base. I think I'm going to try Rust 1 as my base layer and just experiment and see how that goes. So I'm going to go ahead and place that inside my Photoshop document. Now the image needs to be bigger than the planet-based marquee when I control-click on the thumbnail, but it can't be bigger than my document. So what I need to do is stretch the image until it fits my actual document. In Photoshop, hit Control-T, but I need to hold down Shift to break the proportions when I click and drag from a tab. And I'm going to drag until it snaps to the edge of the document. In Photopea, you don't have to hold down Shift when you do this. It's the opposite. You click and hold down Shift to maintain proportions in Photopea. Okay, so my image is placed, and it's this exact same size as my document. Now the first thing I need to do in Photoshop is rasterize the layer. You may not need to do this in Photopea, but in Photoshop I'm going to right-click on the layer and select Rasterize Layer. Now I want to remove the color. So for that I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and select Desaturate. Now it's all gray. Now I'm going to control-click on the thumbnail for my planet base to get my circular marquee. But I want to delete everything outside the circle, so I'm going to inverse my selection. Go to Select, Inverse, and now the marquee is outside the circle. Just hit Delete, and then I can re-invert it back to just the moon. I like it, and so now all I need to do is Sphereize it. So I'm going to go to Filter, Distort, and select Sphereize. Make sure it's set to 100, and then just click OK. That's a pretty good start. I'm going to repeat this process with a second image. Deselect your marquee by hitting Control-D. I'm going to head back to my folder and pick another texture. And this time I'm going to choose, I really like Concrete 3. I'm going to give that a shot and see what happens. So I'm going to place it inside Photoshop. I'm going to hold down Shift to break the proportions and stretch it until it actually fits my document perfectly and then hit enter. Same as before, I need to right click on the layer and select rasterize layer, and then I need to desaturate it by going to Image, Adjustments, Desaturate. Control click on the thumbnail for planet base and then select the inverse. Hit delete and then re-invert it back. Now here's where I can get creative. I have a lot of options here. I can try dropping the opacity to let some of the texture underneath come through. Or I can even erase part of this layer. Click on the eraser, select a relatively large sized brush. I'm at about 800 pixels right now, but most importantly, make sure that hardness is set to 0. And I can try taking out certain areas, like maybe I'll fade this out a little bit. Now I also drop the opacity of the brush down to about 50%. And I'm going to take out some areas. Right? Now I'm going to drop the opacity a little bit and see how that looks. Let some of the texture come through. And that's not bad. Now all I have to do is spherize it. Filter and select Spherize. If you do not have the repeat feature at the top, then just go back to Distort and Spherize. Click OK. And then there you go. I have my base layer. And then another layer on top of it where I did a little bit of erasing. I dropped the opacity a little bit to let my base come through. This is looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy so far. I'm just going to do this again. Head back to my images. And this time I'm going to select Concrete 1. Put that inside my document. I'm going to hold down Shift in Photoshop to stretch it. Oh, it came in because I had Rust 01 selected. It dropped it in between. So I need to move my layer on top. There we go. And then get back to transforming it to fit my document. There we go. Hit enter. Rasterize the layer. Desaturate. Just like we did before. Control click on the planet base thumbnail to get our circle. Select inverse. Delete. And then re-invert it back. And now I just do the exact same thing. I can drop the opacity. Or I can do some erasing. Use a smaller brush. Take out a few more chunks here and there to let the other layers come through a little bit better. I'm going to drop the opacity a little bit. Actually, no, I'm not. I think I'm going to leave it. Yeah, I'm going to put it at 90%. Now I'm going to try going through some layer blending modes and see if anything cool happens. So I'm going to select normal for my topmost layer and then just scroll through the different selections to see if anything cool happens. I like darken. Lighten looks pretty good. Oh, I really like overlay. Soft light looks good as well. I think I'm going to put it on soft light. Your base must be set to normal and 100%, desaturated and spherized. What you do on top of it, you can change the layer blending mode if you want, or change the opacity, or even erase parts, like I did, here and here. I really like what I have going on here. This is a nice mix of textures. I just need to spherize this layer. So set it to soft light, which I had it, and then go to Filter, Distort, Spherize, and there we go. Once again, I have a minimum of 3 layers. My bottommost layer is desaturated, set to normal blend mode, 100% opacity, and is spherized. my other layers. I have tried different combinations of layer blend modes, opacities, and even a little bit of erasing. Once you have your moon built the way you want, go ahead and submit it to your instructor for approval. Now that your moon surface is approved, it's time to finalize it. All we need to do is merge the 3 layers. So I'm going to select my topmost layer, hold down Shift, select my bottommost moon layer, and then go to the submenu and select Merge Layers. Now I just need to rename it Moon. Control D to deselect. Now, since we were using the planet-based marquee, we can also use the shadow that was built with that circle for our moon. I just want to zoom in to 100% and make sure that there's no errors along the edge. And I'm looking pretty good. So your moon should be underneath your shadow layer, and we're using the exact same shadow with our moon that we did with our planet. Now I just need to do the same thing I did with my planet. Select both layers, and I'm going to duplicate them. I'm going to hide the originals, and then I'm going to merge my shadow copy and my moon copy. Then just rename it Moon and Shadow. Now I can go ahead and place my moon and shadow where I want. So let's go ahead and bring up my planet and shadow layer, as well as my nebula folder. I'm going to move my moon and shadow to be the topmost layer. And now all I need to do is figure out where I want it, how big it should be, and then rotate it to the same angle as my planet. I'm going to start by rotating first. Control T to transform, and then type in the same number I did before. -15. Control T to scale. In Photopea, make sure you hold down Shift. In Photoshop, do not hold down Shift. Now your moon needs to be significantly smaller than your planet. This is why we wanted our planet to stay big. The moon cannot be overlapped by the planet. It's then implying that the moon is gigantic. So if the moon overlaps the planet, that's okay. But the planet cannot overlap the moon. And it needs to be significantly smaller than your planet. Now you just got to figure out where you want it to go. Click on the Move tool. Perhaps I can balance it by moving it up here to the top right. Maybe overlap my nebula, but sit next to my 2 nearby stars. Or I could possibly overlap my planet a little bit to help create more depth. There's a lot of locations that work. I just need to pick something that feels right for my composition. I'm having a hard time deciding between whether or not I want it overlapping the nebula over here or overlapping my planet here. I think I'm going to go with over here. But I don't like both of these stars so close. So I'm going to go back to my star field, open up the folder, and find those lens flares. And then move it to a new location. I like that better over here. And this lens flare, I want to move just a little bit further away. Now I just feel like my nebula is too bright. I need to fade it. It's competing with my planet and moon. I should notice the planet first, and then everything else. And right now it's so bright that it's kind of competing with my planet. So I'm going to select my nebula folder, and then just drop the opacity. That's a little bit better. Now I feel my Spacescape is complete, and I can share it with my instructor for approval. Be ready for feedback in terms of adjusting your planet size or location, changing the opacity of your nebula, or perhaps changing the scale or location of your moon.